Okay. By now, hopefully, you have tried assignment 0 and banged your head on the wall a little bit. Do you have any questions? Most of you finished assignment 0. It is not graded, right? If you didn't finish, it's not the end of the world, but it should be a very good learning experience, right? If you didn't submit, it's probably because you didn't start early enough, right? And that's probably the main indicator. If you start early, then you can ask if you get stuck, and you can get unstuck early. If you start on Saturday or Sunday for something that's due on Sunday, then you're probably doomed if you ever get stuck. If you don't get stuck, then you could do it in half an hour and be done, but if you get stuck, then you're stuck. So, other than that meta thing, do you have any questions about assignment 0? Not so much about assignment 0, but about GitLab, Git Bash, all of those things.
The thing that I got hung up on for a long time, and it just eventually worked, so I don't know what I was doing wrong. In the git bash command, when I went to commit, it just kept saying, "Tell me who you are, please," and wouldn't accept.
Oh, and then, but it tells you, tell me who you are, and this is exactly how you tell me who you are.
And I tried both options, and it would not take them for some reason, and then it just eventually worked, so I don't even know what I was doing wrong to try and address it.
Yeah, it should.
Yeah,
Yeah, it asks you to tell it your name and your email address.
Yeah, it said, "Tell me who you are," and then it gave an option of your email address or your username, and I tried both ways,
You
literally
were
over 5
probably
hours.
typing something slightly different.
Okay.
Because I had the same thing, and I just Googled it, and I found like the GitHub.
But it actually tells you, right? It tells
yeah, it
you,
tells you, and I
type
did
git
exact-
minus minus global user dot email whatever, right? Something like that. And so
Yeah, I did it. I had 2 other people looking at it. One person was like an experienced programmer. He's like, "I don't know why it's not taking it," and I just like uninstalled
Close the
everything
computer
and
and-
redid the whole repo, and then it took at the end. But I don't.
you were using Windows.
I'm using Windows, yes.
That's the standard. It's like it worked. Usually, Unix systems tend to stay broken once you break them. Windows, who knows?
So I submitted it, I think I did everything right, but it's not for a grade, right? So if I did something.
It's not for a grade.
Okay, because like when I submitted it, it's like cool, and I'm like, okay, wait, did I forget anything? I don't know, but I guess I'll find out in the feedback.
Keep in mind, you can update. Submitting doesn't mean that you're done. It means that I start grading it, right? Actually, may not even mean that I start grading it. You may submit just, I'm stuck in here, so you submit a merge request and then go. By the way, I call it pull request because that's what somebody else calls them, rather than merge request. They're the same thing. But you can submit a merge request that's incomplete, and then go and put comments in your file. I'm stuck here, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and that's perfectly okay, right? You can submit 7 times.
Okay, yeah.
Probably no more than 7 because that's like 1 a day. But, it's perfectly okay to update your submissions up until the last minute. I will try to grade and give you feedback, and if something's broken, you get to fix it. I'll try once we get into the hang of things. So yeah, it's perfectly okay, and this one is not graded, so life is good. Any other questions about Git and branches and stuff? You will probably get stuck. It is a good idea if you see I have command line. Many of you have never used the command line before. It is perfectly okay to not have used it before. It is not perfectly okay to not have used it after. You will have to use it here, right? You're going to be programmers. You need to learn how to use the command line. go.
I only
do
know
those
like
things.
cd backslash and ip config.
That's
all.
actually, you are 2 steps ahead of everybody else. How are you going to learn the command line? Practice.
Do it a lot.
Do it. Do it. Do it. You need to you need to warp your brain, first of all, to be very specific with, it's a different kind of editing than English editing, right? Because here spaces are, but it's the same kind of stuff, right? Like, oh, this you should put 2 dashes together, and it's not 2 dashes, it's actually a longer dash in English, right? But nobody cares. Here, the computer does care, so you need to be very careful about whether you're using spaces and things like that, both when you type commands and when you program.
So the git bash, it is a Unix command line.
It is bash.
Okay, because it seemed like my friend who knew Unix, he was like, "Oh, try this command." Some of them worked and some of them
It
didn't.
gives you bash and most of the Unix stuff, and gives you Git. So it makes Windows almost usable.
Okay.
Almost.
It's a little different though.
It's, yeah. And it's actually, when you get into how it interacts with Windows, sometimes it becomes weird. But
Okay, that's fine.
yes.
Did you do any more repo accounts today? Create any more today?
No.
Okay.
Did you send something yesterday?
Yeah.
I haven't done anything today.
Okay. Alright.
Actually, I did one that I have the email at half. I created the account but didn't send the email. That may be you.
Alright. I sent it to the KSU.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
You should be sending it to my KSU. Oh, and I wanted to ask you guys a huge favor. Never, ever, ever send me email from D2L. Because it just irks me. I get it, I have it forwarding to my email, but it's fake email, it's not email. I click reply and type stuff, and it doesn't go to you. They didn't do the second half, right? So I get an email, reply to it, and then the next time that I open my email, I see an error message that says that didn't go to you, and then I forward it to you usually. But after getting mad and having to find your email, and takes longer for you to get the answer. So don't use D2L for email. There is no way for me to eliminate D2L email from D2L. So don't ever use it. For me, at least. So don't ever use it. If you want email, use email. But any other things? No, you're cool. You kind of understand Bash and Git and that kind of stuff. At least enough to do assignment 0 to kind of do assignment 1.
The video helped too, but the font is too small to watch that video whenever you do the,
Oh, for those,
Bash thing, yeah.
the videos for assignment 0 and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
assignment 0.
Okay.
Whenever you type it on the command line,
It's
too
hard to
small.
see.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
Sorry.
The problem
If you make
with
a
the
little
YouTube
bit
video is
bigger
when you
font.
pause it to look at it, the pause obscures it, so you have to like rewind it.
Isn't that cool? Well, most of the stuff on the video is actually the same stuff that's on the website, right? So the stuff that is
I
typed,
use the
you can
video.
see it
I
there.
have to pause. I put it on 2 screen. I have to pause it, type it in, watch the video.
But you actually don't do that. Get used to cut and pasting because it makes your life so much easier, right? What you do is you go to the website. I have the commands that you can actually cut and paste. You cannot cut and paste from a video, but you can, right? So like
Yeah, what was the
I have this
keyboard
stuff
shortcut for?
and then this
That
stuff,
video,
right?
actually, yeah.
So if you're watching the video, right? Let me stop. Just like, let's go somewhere where I'm doing it. Maybe?
Especially right
Like
there.
this.
Yeah, right.
But
there.
let me stop it. I stopped.
Yeah.
rather than trying to do this stuff, right? What you do is, it is here. And I'm telling you exactly what to type, so you come here.
Which is what I was doing the first time, but the very last one has like 3 M's in the commit, and that was the one thing that wasn't working.
Ah,
So
did I put commit with 3 M's? Yes. You have to be really committed.
Oh.
Well, like I tried it with 2 M's. I tried literally hundreds of
It's
combinations.
with 2 M's. With 2 M's, it should work.
With 2 M's
Yeah,
when it
on
said
the
tell me
video
who you
it's
are,
2
and
M's.
wouldn't
It,
accept
and it should tell me who you are, yes. And then you have to tell it who you are.
It was not accepting that. Like I developed alcoholism, like trying to figure this out. Like it was terrible.
How do you paste into the command line? What's the keyboard shortcut?
With git bash, it is control insert to copy and shift insert to paste, or the other way around.
It's really my
Just
default
Command
is
V
middle mouse
is gonna
button.
paste it.
So if you go into like setup, you can change it. Because I was kept doing control V and give me this weird symbol.
Yeah, I kept trying to do Control V. I'm like,
Control
well, you just
C
can't
and
do
Control
it,
V
so-
cannot work ever because Control C is reserved in Unix for break from a program. So they will never do Control C and Control V. But it's Control insert and Shift insert.
Okay,
And I cannot remember which one is which.
Alright, I'll figure it out.
If I'm on the keyboard, I will remember, but this is a Mac, so it doesn't have inserts.
I spent like a lot of time trying to well, you can't paste it, so I have to look and see exactly what you have
But
to type
actually-
and go back and forth, and then eventually I figured out, oh, you can just paste it. I didn't know that the whole time. You just hit Control Insert or whatever.
It let me right click in the batch window and paste actually.
You can,
Oh, I didn't even know that.
just like the normal command prompt, but
I didn't think to use the mouse. That was too complicated.
it's Control insert and Shift insert. But I don't remember which one is which. Oh well. It is politician's promise. I was trying to go access some sort of remote Windows box so I could do that stuff, but I
It's okay.
just realized my Azure account expired.
Or you can go to top the menu, you click a menu, and they say copy, then you copy,
Oh, I
go
did,
click,
okay.
and you go paste.
I'm
and
thinking about the
that's the
buttons
way
or
to-
the mouse or
It is Shift insert. I'm almost. Does anybody have Git Bash open?
It's okay.
We do
We
that.
can move on. We're just
Shift insert should paste. No, and that is important because it's gonna make your life so much easier, right? Actually, the other thing is tab is your friend.
Yeah, it's not command tab.
If I press tab, it autocompletes.
Or up arrow.
Up arrow does the last few
Yes.
commands,
Yeah.
but tab autocomplete. So when you're typing file names, right? You're never gonna type the file name correctly. With tab, you verify that you're typing it correctly by not typing it. Does that make sense?
yeah.
If I was here and I would be doing stuff like, I think this is it. Nah. So if you're going to do something like git add a0/source main, right, I'm just typing tab. I'm just hitting the
Yeah.
tab key.
Yeah, you only need the tab key and the enter key to use the console.
Yes. The likelihood of me actually being able to type that stuff with the right upper and lowercase characters is very small. Your other friend, git status. I typed this hundreds of times, right? This tells me exactly what branch I'm on, which changes do I have not staged for commit, and if I had, like if I do git add.git ignore, I have no clue what I have here. it will tell me I have this stage for commit. This is if I do commit and push, this is what will be pushed, and I have all these other things that are not staged, right? So you should be typing git status all the time.
Is that the same as the pwd command?
No, pwd tells you the folder that you're on.
Okay, okay.
Which directory you in?
pwd is like the top bar of your Windows Explorer thing that tells you
Okay.
which folder you're on.
The status gives you like all this stuff.
Status, this is Git specific stuff. I think Git Bash actually shows you some of that stuff automatically. It shows you like which branch you're on by default, which is nice, but this gives you more information. Depending on what kind of stuff do you like, you can make your IDE, either Eclipse or IntelliJ, do Git stuff for you if you learn how to configure it, or you can get GUI stuff for Git. I tend to use the command line and try to push you towards using the command line just because it's a lot easier to debug by email and phone.
IntelliJ, before you run it, you have to configure settings.
What you do, I'm giving you the stuff. Just do /gradlu idea, and that will generate the project for IntelliJ. Just like /gradlew, right? Grade for grading, IDEA will generate the IntelliJ project, and that looks at where's your Java folder and configures it and does all that stuff. After doing this, then opening the project should be configured with a Java version and all of that. If not, I think you need to configure the Java version, and the first time it's a pain. Sorry, I tend to not. I use IntelliJ every day, and I still don't learn this stuff because it changes every version and stuff like that. So I tend to like the command line much better. It tends to stay a lot longer, being almost the same. Any other questions on this stuff? No? Java, the stuff that we have seen, variables, int, strings, doubles, it's all good? Cool. Then let's really start talking about functions. Assignment 1 is relatively easy. It is due this Sunday, and it is for real, right? Assignment 0 wasn't graded. Assignment 1 is due Sunday midnight, and with a grace period until Wednesday before class for 10% of your grade. When should you start assignment 1? Actually, why haven't you guys started? No. Tonight's a good enough answer.
It was supposed to start last week, I think. That's when it was due.
Nah, but it's just, right? If you start tonight, if you get stuck, you can ask questions on Wednesday, right? And get unstuck. If you start on Saturday, bad things may happen. So let's talk about functions, and then let's go make 700 examples, right? The idea is we want to build abstractions. We want to build our own language, right? We want to specify procedures or operations and then forget about them. This is probably the most important thing that you're going to be doing in this class is switching hats, switching levels of abstraction. This defines a function called isEven that returns a Boolean and takes one argument, an int, and inside the function, I'm calling that argument number, right? And this function would return whether the number modulo 2 is equal to 0, right? If it is, then it would return true. If not, it would return false. Once I have this, then I can call it and use it. Let me use Java REPL for a second. And it is a pain because I don't think it likes multi-line functions. So I need to do horrible things to Java REPL. So I can do is even get false, is even 24, and get true. Does that make sense?
Why is number modulus 2 in parentheses?
Oh, why is it in parentheses? Good question. Do I need the parentheses? What's the precedence of operators between equal, equal, and modulo? Which one should go better? What does PEMDAS say?
I thought it would be modulo.
Well,
I guess
what does PEMDAS say? You remember? What did they teach you in middle school about the equal, equal operator?
I don't think they taught us that.
Yes! So what's the right order? What's the right precedence? And that, I don't know. So what do you do when you don't know? Add extra parentheses. You can also just not add them and see if you didn't need them. I added them because I need them.
Oh, okay.
They are not needed, I
Oh,
think,
alright.
but I need them. It's just to clarify to me
Okay.
what I'm doing. But that's kind of right. If you can either go memorize the tables of precedences and figure out which one goes better, right? Or just add extra parentheses. If you're adding 17 extra parentheses, then you may want to go memorize some precedents. But and somebody else was complaining that I don't use spaces. I don't know why. You can actually get your IDE. Let me create a new project. Close this one. Let me just create a new project and we'll start doing stuff here. I should create new project. If you guys remind me, I will post this stuff for whatever we do, but just a plain Java thing. What's your problem, thingy? Oh, it doesn't. It does have Java. Oh, next. Copy this from here. I can do code reformat code. And it will make it nice and add spaces and stuff. And you can change how you want it. So if my code formatting bugs you, figure out how to use this and make it formatted any way you want. It should be this way. Oh, that's why it didn't complain. I think that's what the formatting. Move this up, right, and stuff like that. If you don't like it, you can go figure out how to change it to make it format whatever you want. If you're using Eclipse, the keystrokes are different, but the stuff is the same. There is a way to reformat your code. You could even set it to format automatically when you save or something like that. Does this make sense? In here, I can do stuff like system.out.println, and for now, assume this is magic. System.out.println will print whatever I put in there and print a new line. So what would this print? This line would print false, and this one. So if I do Apple F9, maybe. Eventually it will print that stuff. Apple F10. Run my, oh, Shift F10. Okay.
So this is only 13 lines. What happens when you get into like hundreds of lines of code? How long does it take to run it each time? Does it just depend, or?
It depends.
I mean, I would assume that would take like a couple of milliseconds, but
Well, to run,
yeah.
but the IDE has to compile it. Next one, if you look, let me do, if I do it again, it's super fast because it's already compiled. Actually, maybe if I do it again, it won't be that bad because half of this stuff is already compiled. But compiling is actually a heavy processor intensive thing. So you want a good processor. Macs are beautiful. They're not known for having the fastest processor ever. So this is a mid-level Core i5. The other thing that you do, we use make systems like Gradle, so you only compile the stuff that changed. So if you have thousands of files, right? If you have thousands of lines of code in a file, then you're doomed because you'd never be able to see what the heck you were trying to do. If you have hundreds of files, each one of them hundreds of lines of, right? 100 lines of code, you still got 10,000 lines of code. But normally you only change 1 or 2 files. So all of the others don't. So making your thing should not take that long. On the other hand, and then if you're going to be sitting in front of a computer the whole day trying to compile stuff, you try to get the fastest computer you can get so you don't spend so much time waiting. Anything above half a minute causes alcoholism. So you normally want to keep your builds to like half a minute to a minute. It sucks. It should be instantaneous, but it's not. Like at work, my builds take between 20 seconds to a couple of minutes. We also run unit tests and things like that, so it's not this tiny thing. But anything above that, I start to go nuts and start to go figuring out ways of making the build not take so long. Does this make sense? Let's go build more stuff. How about is odd? What would I change? This? This, right?
Yeah.
And my font is pretty and it uses that equal. It should be bang equal. Just that my font prints it nicely. Yeah, 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 yeah. I got pretty phones. I probably should disable it for this class because it's going to confuse you more. But now I don't remember how to do that. I don't remember how I enabled it. So those two return ints. How about return booleans, right? How about if I want? Oh, actually, let me show you one piece of magic. For now, use it as magic. When we are doing Java REPL, don't. When we are doing it here, add static to all those functions. Just like we did it with main. You may actually add public if you want to. It's not needed for now, but static is. It basically says this belongs to the class, not to each instance of a class. In a few weeks, we'll see how to define classes and things like that. Right now, we're defining functions, so we don't have classes. We still have a class. We have public class, whatever, but only one class in the whole program. So add static. Consider it magic incantations that you add to everything. If we want to return something else, how about a function that returns ints? What would change?
Write it instead of bool.
So how about really complicated stuff? Add two numbers. What do we do?
Stay with the equal.
Return what?
Equal.
Really cool, right? This was assignment 0, right? Does this make sense? We're always, what does return mean? And
It's what the ends the function.
stop doing the function, and that's the value that you give to the outside, right? So here we could have what do we print? Hopefully 8, right? Actually, functions can call other functions. How we're going to add 3 numbers. What can we do? We could do what?
Return add 2 with A and B plus C.
Good. Actually,
Or that, yeah.
I could just return A plus B plus C, right? But I'm showing you that we can do this kind of stuff. Does that make sense? What happens when you have add 3, you call it with 3 numbers. First it's going to call this add 2 of A and B, evaluate it, right? That thing yields a value, and then it's going to plug that value in, and then call add 2 again with that value on C, and eventually produce a result. Does that make sense? What would this return? Or print, sorry. 11. Yeah. Really convoluted way of doing the 11. Does this idea make sense?
They will become add 3 or add 2 system.out.println.
System.out.println is gonna print. It's gonna, in order to evaluate this, the compiler will generate generate code call add3 and pass 1, 2, and then it's going to generate code to call add2, calculate that thing, and then pass add3 with 1, 2, and 8. Call add3 with 1, 2, and
Do you put extra spaces in the print line just to make it easier to see?
8. Yes.
Okay, so that's how you want to do it for some.
Yes. Does this idea make sense?
Okay, how about rather than put in aug2, 3, and 5, you just, if you put the value right there.
I could. And it would just work. Right? I mean, how deeply can I nest these calls?
Until you run out of memory.
Yes. The compiler, you will get tired way before the compiler gets tired, right? You could complicate this any way you want. Does that make sense? Sometimes, and this is idiotic in this case, but I can define variables inside my functions, and they are local to the function, right? So I could define is even this way. Let me go put it in here instead of this other guy, right? I'm creating here a new variable called remainder by 2, which is the number, the remainder of the number and 2, and then I'm going to compare that with 0. That variable, remainder by 2, only lives while the function is being called. When the function returns, that variable disappears, right? It's only there for that function call. Does that make sense? That is what is called a local variable. Right now, it's not terribly useful. It's actually probably more confusing. We'll see when we can do more things inside our functions that this becomes useful.
So remainder by 2 is a local variable and number is a parameter.
Exactly.
And he said like remainder by 2 only lives when the function is called.
Yes.
Would you say that about the parameter also, or?
The binding only lives what the function is called. The value may live forever.
Okay.
Does that make sense? The fact that I'm calling this, I could have, say, int a equals 5. If I pass a here, right? The fact that for this, or let me do is even a. For this function call, I'm gonna call that value number only for this function call. So that binding is only alive for that function call.
Yeah.
But a may be alive forever, or outside the function. Whereas this is never, nobody knows, right? Only the function knows.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? But yes, the binding is only for the function call. And if I call it with something else, then the binding will be different, right? Now number in this function call would take whatever value that is. Right? And then for this function call, number would take whatever value this is. binding is only active while you call the function, right? And then it's gone. Does that idea make sense? So we can have local variables, we can nest function calls any way we want. We could compose our function, right? So we could have if sum even that takes two numbers and returns, first of all, calls add or add2 actually. No, here I'm calling them add, not add2. And then calls is even on the return of that add, just like what we're doing with add3. Does that make sense? Any level of nesting. So imagine that we have this, int a equals 10, b equals add AA, so what's b? 20, and then ans equals add 5 to add AB. So what's that? 35, right?
Do you practically wind using like a function add all the time, or do you just usually just write parentheses a plus b?
For something like add, I write parentheses a plus b,
Yeah, okay.
right? I would never write an add function except as an example. But you'd be surprised how many times, like, I would not write add, but if even, I may write.
Yeah, because there's no convenient keyboard.
Right, because it's, and it's like, do I really want to remember modulo, right? And so we tend to write convenience functions all the time. Stuff like, is empty for data structures, rather than saying size equals 0. We do it all the time. Depends on, I tend to write smaller functions more than most, partly because I like functional programming, partly because I've been teaching these classes for a while, and so it kind of warps my brain towards needing those things. Different people have different ideas.
But no one's going to yell at you like, oh, don't do that, that uses too much memory or something like that.
Nah,
It's just a style
not in
thing.
normal programming,
Okay.
not for next 5 years probably. Especially, they would probably get really mad at you if you define add.
Well, yeah, I can imagine
that's
that,
like-
but there's some
no.
borderline cases where
Yeah. If even is borderline, if even is probably not a great thing, but have like, I would probably define if even.
by the time you get in trouble for something like that, you'd know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would probably actually define if even, and my team would be okay with it. Add no. But yeah, that stuff, that is actually kind of the hardest part, right? And I wouldn't do add because plus is super useful, right? It's, you know it in math. It's actually, add is, plus is fresher in my brain than add, right? If you think about it. But for some other things that may seem simple, yes, especially if you change the domain, right? If it's a word that goes better with the domain or something like
AL
that.
strings or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Purity and functions. Let me get on my soapbox. Here's the deal. What you're gonna be doing, right, is eventually your program needs to change the world. Ooh, that sounds lofty. No, right? You printed something on the screen. Well, now the world is different, right? Before there wasn't stuff printed, now there's stuff printed, right? Functions, pure functions that just take values and compute other values are very simple to reason about. We can think of them independently. They don't have time effects, right? If I call is even on the number 7, it's always going to return false. It's going to return false today. It's going to return false tomorrow. It's going to return false when the end of the universe, right? With things that change when your functions and procedures and stuff start changing the world. Now you need to worry about the order in which they happen, right? Well, if I call this, well, I don't know, because now this thing printed stuff on the screen. So if I do something like this, instead of is even, right? If I had something like, instead of returning, right? If I had, I'm not calling it here, right? F is good. This would be an impure function. So here I wouldn't need to print. Is that better or worse? You know what I want you to say, right?
Just depends what you're trying to do.
Well, I want you to say that it's worse, and here's why. These are impure. Instead of just getting values and producing an output, now I'm actually changing the world. I'm changing the screen, right? So now, before you call this, you need to figure out where are you in printing stuff to the screen, right? This makes it hard to combine the functions. I cannot call, right? I cannot combine this with adding or something like that. Like if I have a function that just prints the addition of two numbers, I cannot combine these functions. Now I need to worry about which order they get called, because they are accessing a global world state, the screen. Does that make sense? It's gonna make your life so much easier if you have pure functions for the most part. Eventually you can't have everything pure, right? You have to change the world, because that's the point of running your program. Printing something on the screen, or saving it to a file, or saving it to a database, or doing something, right, to the world. But if you can keep most of your stuff as pure functions, you can reason about them, you can test them independently, you can do all sorts of things to them much easier. Does that make sense? Undo this stuff, make it pure again. Beautiful pure functions. So ideally your functions should be pure. They just return a value, right? That calculation may be complicated. You may be getting matrices and multiplying them and doing other stuff, but you should just get values, return values, right? Then you can be tested independently and so on. So let's go play. Oh, by the way, I am horrible. I'm a horrible human being, and I'm keeping a typo in assignment 1. I define is in between with a typo. So go fix it or not use is in between. So we could define a function called is in between. What does this do? Gives a number, a low and a high, and it returns whether the number is greater than or equal than low and less than or equal to high. So it's between low and high. Does that make sense? What would this print? Hopefully. Make sense? We can have all true, takes 3 booleans, returns whether they are all true. Any true takes 3 booleans, returns whether any of them is true. What operators are we using? And or, right? Exclusive or is either B1 or B2 and not B1 and B2. That's the idea of exclusive or, right? Could have functions with doubles, right? Whether to check two doubles are close, I'll say they are close within this tolerance, so that's the difference is less than that tolerance, but the difference may go either way. So I'm checking whether the positive difference is less than tolerance, or the negative difference is less than tolerance, because I don't know which one is going to be. One interesting thing, it seems obvious, right, that you want to keep your functions different, so you want to not define functions with the same name, right? Maybe. It's not that obvious, right? But seems like a good idea, right? However, it's not always a good idea, right? It may not be terribly useful to have add2 and add3. They are obviously different. One takes two things, the other one takes 3, right? So they're obviously different. Java allows what is called overloading of functions. You can define functions with the same name and a different number of arguments or different types of arguments, and Java will understand usually when you're calling them which one do you mean. Does that make sense? It may not be a good idea. It may be confusing, but
Why would you do that? Why do you want to do that?
why do I want to do that? For example, for add, right? Imagine that I really want to have an add function. Is it very useful to have add2, add3, and add4? Or should I just call them all of them add and have 2, 3, or 4 arguments? We'll see. We really need it for constructor overloading when we see classes. You want to be able to build your objects with different things. That's where we really need them. For all the other stuff, it's just convenient. I may want to have, for example, kind of default value. What would be a good example? Like, I could, let's see. It's just convenience. What's a good overloading?
It's easy to think of like classes that you'd want to overload, but like just functions.
Yeah, well, many times, like, what is a good example? I'm trying of a good example that's not complicated. Try to think of one that's on the. Like, I could do stuff like this. Imagine that I want to call my function add. I can also do another add that takes why should I it's more the other way around. If I have these two names, that why should I have to come up with and call this add strings, right? And this one add ints, for example. Instead of just calling them add, there is no possibility of confusion. Does that make sense? We'll see later better places for good examples. It's just important for you to understand that it could happen.
But the inside of the function doesn't have to be the same.
No.
It's just that the parameters can be different and it's the same function name.
It's the same function name. Either the number of parameters has to be different or the type of parameters has to be different.
And those two functions are in no way the same function.
They have nothing to do with each other.
Okay.
They just happen to
They
share
have
the same name.
Okay.
Sometimes it gets confusing.
So whenever you call, which one, it calls both at the same time?
No, it will know because it knows types, right? If I do this, now I don't have add2 anymore. If I call, which one does it call?
Oh, but this time it's gonna call the integer.
If I call this,
It's gonna call the string
and so what's it gonna print?
3 and
3 and 4.
34. It's not 34, but that's what it's gonna look like, right?
3 and 4.
And so it just knows, right? Now,
How about you mix it up?
if I mix it up, I will get an error. Should get a compiler error that says there is no function add that takes a string and an int.
Okay.
And actually, there may be other stuff that's also confusing. And so that's the problem, is that it can be complicated. I don't know if I'm gonna make. Which one am I calling here?
That probably does work.
The one with the ints or the one with the doubles?
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. Does it default to the int?
Yeah. But it's right. I don't know what's the right thing to do, and sometimes it may crash. Like if I use a long, I think will make it say, "Oh, I don't know which one do you mean." Maybe. Well, actually, in this case, it chose the one with the doubles, right? But the rules may not be easy to understand and to guess. And as usual, if the rules are not easy to guess, what should you do?
Test it.
What's a better thing?
Put a lot of parentheses around them.
Even better thing.
Use the Java rep.
Name your freaking functions differently, right? I mean, why confuse yourself? If you are getting confused, by all means use different names, right? If it's, and keep in mind that that stuff will vary. Right now, maybe it confuses you all the time, so you always use different names. That's perfectly okay, right? Maybe in a year it only confuses you in certain times, so you can use overloading. Maybe, right? And your stuff may actually change up and down, right? You get beaten by overloading that breaks your code and makes you lose money or get a bad review or something like that, then you start being a lot more careful with overloading, right? That stuff is kind of style. Just know that it could be done. And then you get to decide whether you want to do it or not. That's a different matter. Does that make sense? Now, most of the time we want our functions to be pure, to return stuff, right? Sometimes you have void functions. They're not really functions, they don't return anything. They don't go with the mathematical idea of a function, but they do go change stuff, right? So, for example, you could have a function print 3 times that takes a string and prints that thing 3 times, called system.out.println, right? It is possible. When I call it, I just call it like this. Print 3 times. Hello, I don't assign or do anything with that value because there is no value to do anything with, but does that make sense? You can, it is perfectly valid. I tend to, within this class, I seldom do this. Only main will change state. In fact, what I normally do is have, I start sending you parameters like this so that you modify them. But we'll see when we talk about objects and using objects. The idea of functions makes sense. We have a few minutes, so let's go do stuff with Java Bat. Coding Bat. Because they have better examples. Hopefully I'm not doing the assignment for you. Sleeping. You get 2 booleans. Weekday and vacation. And we sleep in if it is a weekday. We sleep in if it's not a weekday or we are on vacation. So what do we write? Okay, return, that's good. Yeah, I like it.
Return, what is it? Day.
How do we write is not a weekday?
Exclamation.
Not
Sleep
equals.
in.
Equal.
Not weekday.
What if we do this, right? We actually get 3 okay, but 1 false, right? It's not a weekday, or, how do we write or? Yay, we are good. Next. Monkey trouble. Now we are gonna nominate a volunteer to come do it. Who's gonna come back? You look like a volunteer.
I get to embarrass myself up here, great.
It is perfectly okay. We are doing pair programming.
I feel dumb for that. Is it so I would do like not
Okay, yeah, that is
Okay.
actually a very cool, yeah. If they are the same, then we are in trouble, right? They're both smiling, or if neither of them is smiling, right? Oh, okay, that's, yeah. That's, wait. That's
Oh, an
one
and.
case, right? If, no, that's actually the other way around. Because
It's supposed to be.
A smile or B smile, oh no, that's not, never mind, wait.
Because I thought you would do you could make them both not and then the and, but I might be
Okay.
messing that up.
That's not. No, if you put that, yeah, sure. Finish the whole thing, yeah.
There is more than one way to
There
write
is
it.
700
so
ways to do it.
it's difficult to know.
think I see what you were saying, but then when I do the next part, it's not gonna.
Actually, there's an easy way to do it without booleans by just using equal equal or something like that, right? So if they're equal, right? They're in trouble.
So if I guess if a smile equals b smile at any point, then that would be the issue.
And we still don't compare booleans, right? But in this case, I think that's the right thing. Semicolon. Try it and press.
Oh, do you go? Is that
Yep.
how this goes?
And then, yeah. Yay!
How do you scroll over on a Mac to look at it?
Ah, horrible things. You have to do two fingers
I'm
or
sorry.
something. No, I don't even remember because I just do it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
2 fingers.
2 fingers.
And it depends on how you configure the Mac or something like that. But that's stuff that I don't.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that was way simpler.
I don't
than
think
was
about
thinking.
it. Just like how do you do stuff with the mouse? You start like when you try to teach a kid mouse, it's like, oh wait,
Right, you're
you have to
trying to
turn it.
Yeah, how to tie your shoes.
Yeah, it's like I have no clue how to do that. I just do it. Okay, we have one more. Who's the next volunteer? Shall we go in order? You've been nominated a volunteer. Do you mind? Just click on next. We'll see what it is. Oh, sum double. Oh, but then actually you can't do that one. Okay. Given two int values, return their sum unless the two values are the same, then return double their sum. We cannot do that one yet because we don't know if statements. Right? Sorry. Try the next one.
There you go. I'm trying to go. Okay. Go down. How do I go down?
Well, they hit
2
us.
fingers. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, same thing. This one requires if statements. We're not doing if statements until 2 weeks from today. So, how could we do the absolute difference between n and 21? Have we seen enough?
Let me do like a. Can you do like a operation or something? Like a,
There is, yeah, math.abs gets you the absolute difference.
oh, we can
Return, you have to do
okay.
return. Dot abs of n and 21.
So you said of n and 21,
Yeah, n minus 21. Sorry.
but don't I have to give n a value? I can give it a
No,
value.
it's coming, right? The value is coming. It's a parameter, and it's a parameter
Okay.
above, right? So that will pass some test cases. 2 fingers, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it passes some test cases, but not all of them. Because we don't know how to do if statements yet, on purpose. Does that make sense? Sorry?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a opposite.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Give you back 5 minutes of your life? See you guys on Wednesday, right?